This is Economy Watch, what you need to know about New Zealand's economic life today. Brought to you by interest.co.nz.
Kia ora, and welcome to Wednesday's Economy Watch, where we follow the economic events and trends that affect New Zealand. I'm David Chaston, and this is the international edition from interest.co.nz, and today we lead with news that IMF sees the global economy in a sticky spot. But first up today, we can report that the overnight dairy auction defied recent trends in the futures markets. Instead of another retreat, in fact it held virtually unchanged, up 0.4%. But the two key powders did decline, just not as much as expected. Skim milk powder was down 1.1%, less than the 2% expected, and whole milk powder was down 1.6%, much less than the 6% expected. The event was rescued by the 6.2% rise in cheddar cheese, and to a lesser extent the 0.8% rise in the butter price. The small 0.4% gain in US dollars was enhanced to 0.8% in New Zealand dollars. Now all eyes will turn to the New Zealand Consumers Price Index for the June quarter, which will be released at 10:45 a.m. today. Check back then when we'll have full coverage of data that could well be market moving. Overnight, American retail sales rose 2.3% in June from a year ago, not quite enough for this to be a real gain, but closer than recently. There was no change between May and June because car sales took a breather. So far in 2024, American car repossessions are up 23% compared to the same period last year, according to data from Cox Automotive. That comes after a long low period, however, but they are up 14% from pre-pandemic levels. And last week, retail sales, as measured by the Red Book Index for physical stores, rose much less than recently, although the year-on-year gain was still an impressive 4.8%. But it was the weakest gain since late March. Slowing American retail sales growth is putting upward pressure on business inventories, although again it is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. In May, they are 1.7% higher than a year ago, but related to current sales levels, they're unchanged. In Canada, CPI inflation for June was released overnight and it eased to 2.7% from 2.9% in the prior month. This wasn't expected because markets had assumed it would remain at the 2.9% mark. The Canadians have already started their easing cycle in their policy interest rate, even though they target a 2% midpoint in a 1 to 3% range. Perhaps the early start is needed because they had a rather sharp drop in new housing starts in June, down by more than 20,000 or 9% from May. Vancouver fell 13% due to sharp falls in multi-unit starts. Toronto crashed 37% for the same reason. And the IMF expects the global economy to grow 3.2% in 2024, the same as in the April Outlook, but the 2025 growth forecast was revised higher by 0.1% to 3.3%. For 2024, they revised their forecast for the US down to 2.6% versus 2.7% earlier, reflecting the slower-than-expected start to the year. In Europe, the growth for the euro area is seen higher. In Asia, growth forecasts were also revised higher for both China and India, while the Japanese GDP is seen expanding at a slower pace. For Australia, they marginally lowered their 2024 estimate, but left the 2025 one unchanged. New Zealand did not get a mention in this report. Meanwhile, they warned that services inflation is holding up progress on disinflation, which is complicating monetary policy normalisation. The US Treasury 10-year yield is now at 4.17% and down 5 basis points from yesterday. And the price of gold will start today up $42 from yesterday at $2,464 an ounce, and that's an all-time record high. But oil prices are down $1, just on $80.50 a barrel in the US, while international Brent price is just over $83.50 a barrel. And the Kiwi dollar starts today sharply lower at 60.4 US cents and down nearly another half a cent. Against the Aussie, we're down to 89.8 Australian cents. Against the euro, we're down to 55.5 euro cents. That all means our trade-weighted index starts today at 69.3 and down 30 basis points from yesterday. And the Bitcoin price starts today at $64,426 and up 1.8% from yesterday. Volatility over the past 24 hours has been moderate at just on plus or minus 2.2%. You can find links to the articles mentioned today in our show notes, and you can get more news affecting the economy in New Zealand from interest.co.nz. Kia ora, I'm David Chaston, and we'll do this again tomorrow.